The forest stretches vast and unending, a realm where ancient trees stand tall, their branches like twisted arms reaching toward the sky. The canopy above is dense, a web of leaves so thick that sunlight struggles to pierce through, leaving the ground below shrouded in a perpetual twilight. The air is heavy, filled with the earthy scent of moss and decaying wood, and every step feels muffled as if the forest itself swallows all sound. There is an eerie stillness here, a silence that feels too complete. No birds sing, no insects buzz, only the occasional rustle of leaves as the wind moves through, whispering like a distant voice telling stories of long forgotten events. To most, this place might seem like an untouched paradise, a sanctuary away from the clamor of the outside world. But for those who live in the nearby villages, it's a place of unease, a territory marked by warnings and legends passed down through generations. The elders speak of strange occurrences in the woods, tales that are both cautionary and chilling. At night, they say, the forest awakens. It's not the rustle of animals or the usual sounds of nocturnal life. It's something else, something more sinister. Some tell of glowing eyes glimpsed between the trees, eyes that seem to follow and watch. Others speak of low growls, almost human-like, that echo through the valleys when the moon is full. They whisper of shadows that move where shadows shouldn't, and of travelers who once entered the forest and never returned. Their faces are etched into old photographs hung on village walls, names whispered as cautionary tales, reminders of those who sought to challenge the unknown and paid the price. They became part of the forest's lore, lost to its depths, becoming little more than echoes in the stories told around flickering fires. For most, these are merely stories, relics of a past when people feared the dark. But there are those who, even now, refuse to set foot beyond the tree line as night falls. They insist the forest holds more than just animals and trees. They say it's alive, alive in a way that isn't natural, a place where the veil between what is real and what is imagined wears thin. And sometimes that veil tears. It is in this atmosphere of fear and mystery that a new group of adventurers steps into the forest, unaware of the weight of the stories they are stepping into, and the watchful eyes that have seen many like them before. As the fire crackles and the warmth spreads, the hikers relax, trying to shake off the growing unease that has settled among them. The flames dance, casting long, flickering shadows that stretch into the darkness beyond. Sam laughs, recounting a story from another hike, his voice attempting to pierce the stillness, while Claire nods along, her eyes flickering from the fire to the surrounding trees, as if expecting to see movement. Mark, however, remains quiet. He sits a bit farther back, staring into the woods where the darkness seems to press against the circle of light from their fire. The claw mark he found lingers in his mind, replaying over and over. It felt wrong, unnatural somehow. He tries to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a bear, like Claire said, but a gnawing feeling in his gut refuses to let it go. The forest, now cloaked in night, is eerily silent. The usual chorus of crickets and distant animal calls are absent. Only the rustle of leaves in the wind breaks the quiet, sounding almost like footsteps. Claire leans in, stoking the fire and offering a comforting smile. It's probably just the woods settling, you know? Trees creak at night. She says it lightly, but there's a tightness in her expression that Mark catches. A sudden snap echoes from the darkness, louder than the fire's crackle. All three hikers freeze, their eyes darting toward the sound. It's close. Too close. Sam stands, squinting into the blackness beyond their campsite. It's probably just an animal, maybe a deer, he says, though his voice lacks its usual confidence. Mark watches as Sam's eyes scan the perimeter, his body tense, ready for whatever might emerge from the shadows. Claire shivers, pulling her jacket tighter. Let's keep the fire going. It'll keep anything away. She tries to sound reassuring, but Mark notices her hand tremble as she tosses another log onto the flames. The fire flares up, sending sparks spiraling into the night, but the glow seems almost swallowed by the darkness. Minutes stretch into an uneasy silence. Mark's heart pounds in his chest, his senses on high alert. Every rustle, every shift in the wind feels magnified. The forest, once so inviting, now feels like it's closing in on them, as if they're being watched. He forces himself to breathe slowly, trying to convince himself it's all in his head. But somewhere, just beyond the light of the fire, he feels eyes, cold, calculating, and unblinking, fixed on their every move. The night deepens and the cold creeps in, seeping through the fabric of their tents and the warmth of their clothes. The fire, though still burning, seems like a fragile boundary against the darkness that presses in all around them. Sam, restless and unable to shake the sense of being watched, finally stands up. "I'm going to take a look around," he says, trying to sound casual, but the tension in his voice betrays him. Claire looks up, her eyes filled with worry. "Stay close. We don't want to get separated." Her voice carries an edge, a note of urgency she hasn't used before. She knows the stories, even if she hasn't told them to the others. Sam nods, grabbing a flashlight, and begins to sweep its beam slowly across the dense line of trees. The light cuts through the dark like a knife, illuminating the gnarled trunks and the thick undergrowth, but nothing stirs. For a moment, it's just the sound of his footsteps on the leaves, the crackle of the fire, and the distant rustle of branches swaying in the wind. Mark shifts uneasily, his eyes tracking Sam's movement as he steps further from the camp. "This doesn't feel right," he mutters, more to himself than anyone else. He keeps his voice low, as if afraid of breaking the delicate silence hanging over them. Claire's eyes dart between Mark and Sam's figure, just barely visible now in the dim light of the flashlight. Suddenly, Sam's light stops moving. The beam hovers, fixed on a spot between two trees. "Hey, come here. You need to see this." His voice, though not loud, carries a note of urgency that cuts through the silence. Mark and Claire exchange a glance before standing, their breath visible in the cool night air as they approach. As they get closer, the beam illuminates a small, eerie scene. Low on one of the tree trunks, there's something smeared, dark and shiny. Mark leans in, and the smell hits him first. Metallic and raw. Blood. It's not fresh, but it hasn't dried completely either. Claw marks rake down the trunk just beside it, deeper and more vicious than the ones he had seen earlier. Whatever made them was powerful. Sam's hand trembles slightly as he holds the flashlight steady. "What kind of animal does that?" Claire whispers, her voice barely audible. No one answers. The three of them stand in silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down. The wind picks up, causing the branches above to sway, casting long, skeletal shadows that seem to reach for them. The chill is no longer just from the night air, it feels like a warning. Mark's eyes dart around, scanning the trees, expecting movement. The forest feels alive, but not in a way he's ever known. It's as if it's holding its breath, waiting. His heartbeat quickens, pounding in his chest. "We should get back to the fire," he says, his voice tight. "Now." As they turn, a low, guttural growl echoes from somewhere beyond the tree line. It's a sound that doesn't belong, a deep, rumbling vibration that sends a shiver through each of them. Sam swings the flashlight wildly, the beam sweeping through the dark, but finds nothing. "Did you hear that?" he asks, his voice a mix of fear and adrenaline. Claire grabs Mark's arm, her grip tight. "We need to go. Now." They move quickly, almost running back to the safety of the firelight. The growl comes again, closer this time, and their pace quickens. They reach the camp, their breaths coming out in quick, visible puffs as they huddle by the fire, its warmth a fragile comfort. Mark grabs a long branch, poking it into the flames until it catches, holding it like a torch. "Whatever it is, it's not afraid of us," he says, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond. The shadows seem to shift, almost as if something is moving just beyond their sight, watching and waiting. The silence returns, heavy and oppressive. They huddle closer, the firelight casting their shadows in a tight circle, as if it's the only barrier holding back whatever waits in the dark. For now, they sit in uneasy silence, eyes wide, ears straining for any sound. The night stretches long before them, and the sense of being hunted settles in their bones. The fire burns low, its embers glowing like faint stars in the encroaching blackness. The air feels colder now, biting and sharp, as if the warmth of the flames is no longer enough to fend off the chill creeping from the shadows. Mark keeps his makeshift torch close, its flickering light casting strange, distorted shapes on the surrounding trees. The three hikers sit in tense silence, each straining to hear the slightest movement beyond the circle of light. Sam, usually the boldest, grips his flashlight with white-knuckled hands, sweeping it back and forth, though the beam seems to get swallowed by the dense forest. Claire, huddled next to him, looks down at her hands, trying to steady her breathing. Her eyes flick to the darkness beyond, wide and fearful. The growl they heard earlier still echoes in her mind, a sound that seemed both animal and unnervingly human. She grips her jacket tighter, feeling the rising fear that clings to the night air like a fog. "What do you think it is?" Sam finally whispers, his voice barely audible. "A bear? Wolves?" He sounds unsure, and for once his bravado is gone. Mark shakes his head, his eyes still fixed on the shadows. "Bears don't make that sound, and wolves, they don't hunt like this. They don't toy with you." His voice is low, a tension wound tight in every word. The silence stretches, only broken by the crackle of the fire. Then, suddenly, the trees rustle. Not the gentle sway of the wind, but the sharp, deliberate movement of something pushing through the brush. The sound is close, too close. Claire gasps, and Sam swings his flashlight in the direction of the noise. The beam slices through the dark, illuminating only trunks and leaves. There's nothing there, and yet the rustling doesn't stop. It moves, circling their camp, just outside their line of sight. Mark's grip tightens on the burning branch. "Stay close to the fire," he instructs, his voice steadier than he feels. "Whatever it is, it's trying to scare us." The three of them huddle closer, their backs almost touching, forming a defensive circle as they face the woods. The firelight flickers, casting long, claw-like shadows across their faces. Then a sound, a whisper, low and guttural, seems to drift on the wind. It's faint, but there, unmistakably, like a murmur just beyond the trees. Sam's eyes widen. "Did you hear that?" He whispers, panic creeping into his voice. Claire nods, her face pale. "It's not the wind," she says, her voice barely holding steady. Mark's heart pounds in his chest as he listens. The whispering rises and falls like a language he can't understand, something ancient and wrong. He scans the darkness, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing in on them. And then, for a split second, he catches a glimpse, two glowing eyes reflecting the firelight, low to the ground and fixed on their camp. They blink and then vanish. "It's there," he hisses, pointing in the direction he saw the eyes. "I saw it!" Sam's flashlight flicks to the spot, but there's nothing, just the dark forest and the rustling of leaves. The whispering stops, replaced by a deep, guttural growl that vibrates through the air, shaking them to their core. Claire grabs Mark's arm, her nails digging in. "We can't stay here," she says, panic breaking through her voice. "We need to move." But Mark shakes his head. "We don't know where it is. If we leave the fire, we could walk right into it." His eyes dart around, and he knows she's right, but fear roots him in place. Suddenly, a branch snaps behind them, loud and sharp. All three turn, their flashlight beams frantically cutting through the dark. The growl grows louder, moving closer, circling them like a predator. It feels like the forest itself is closing in, the darkness becoming a living, breathing entity. Sam, eyes wide, mutters, "We need to run. We can't just wait here." Mark glances between them, the flickering firelight reflecting the fear in their eyes. The decision feels like a trap. Stay and be hunted, or flee and face whatever waits in the shadows. The wind picks up, carrying with it that foul metallic scent of blood, and the whisper returns, louder, almost mocking. Mark makes the call. "Okay, on my count, we grab our gear and head for the river. It's the only open space." Claire and Sam nod, their faces pale and tense, their breaths coming fast and shallow. The darkness looms, and they know whatever is out there is waiting for them to make a move. Mark counts down under his breath, each number a whisper swallowed by the night. 3, 2, 1. On the final count, they grab their gear and spring into motion, leaving the fire's safety behind. The darkness closes in around them immediately, the forest swallowing the flickering light. Flashlights bob wildly as they dash through the trees, their footsteps pounding against the forest floor, crunching leaves and snapping twigs. The air feels colder, sharper, as they weave through the dense undergrowth. Mark leads the way, his eyes straining to follow the faint glint of the river ahead. Sam follows closely, glancing over his shoulder every few steps, while Claire brings up the rear, her breath quick and shallow. Every shadow feels alive, every rustle and crack a threat. The forest seems to stretch endlessly, trees closing in like a cage. The whispers return, louder now, surrounding them from every direction. As they push forward, the growl comes again, deeper, more guttural, and terrifyingly close. It echoes through the trees, and Mark's pulse quickens. He knows they're being hunted, herded like prey. "Keep moving," he shouts, his voice hoarse. "The river's close." but his words barely pierce the mounting fear clawing at them. Claire stumbles over a root, her flash tumbling from her hand and rolling into the brush. She falls, catching herself with her hands, feeling the sting of scraped skin. "Wait," she cries out, panic thick in her voice. Sam and Mark skid to a halt, doubling back to pull her up. Her eyes are wide, frantic, and her hands shake as she scrambles to her feet. Just as they're about to continue, a flash of movement to their left catches their eyes. A shadow, huge and fast, darts between the trees. It's too quick to fully see, but the size and the speed are enough to send a jolt of terror through them. Claire clutches Mark's arm. "It's following us," she whispers, her voice barely holding together. "Run!" Sam shouts, pushing Claire forward as they break into a sprint. The path becomes uneven, roots and rocks hidden by the shadows, threatening to trip them at every step. The growl rises again, louder and more insistent, as if taunting them. It's closer now, the sound echoing in their ears. The river's murmur grows louder, a faint hope in the darkness. They burst through a thick wall of ferns and suddenly find themselves on the riverbank, the moonlight reflecting off the water's surface. The open space feels like a brief reprieve, but they know the creature is still out there, watching from the tree line. Breathing heavily, they huddle together, scanning the forest edge. "What is it?" Sam whispers, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. "I saw something, but it's too fast." His voice is trembling, and for the first time, he looks genuinely afraid. Mark tightens his grip on his torch, the flame sputtering as he raises it high, trying to illuminate the area. "I don't know," he admits, "but it's not a bear. It's not anything I've ever seen." The forest feels alive, every tree and shadow holding its breath, waiting. Then, from the darkness, the eyes reappear, two glowing orbs fixed on them from across the riverbank. They're low to the ground, unblinking and disturbingly intelligent. For a moment, everything goes still. The only sound is the rushing water and their own ragged breathing. Mark raises his torch higher, the light flickering over the creature's shape. It stands just beyond the tree line, half hidden in shadow. Its form is massive, hunched and covered in matted fur that shimmers in the moonlight. The eyes never leave them, following every movement, and the growl builds into a deep, resonant rumble that vibrates through the air. The creature steps forward, and the light catches its full form, muscular and hunched, like a wolf standing on hind legs. Long claws glint as they grip the ground, and its snout pulls back, revealing sharp, glistening teeth. Claire gasps, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, it's real," she whispers, barely able to form the words. Sam backs up, his flashlight shaking. "We need to cross the river. Now," he says, his voice barely containing his fear. Mark nods, shoving Claire ahead as they stumble into the freezing water. The current tugs at their legs, but they push through, their eyes never leaving the beast as it watches from the shore, its growl following them across the dark, moonlit expanse. The icy water grips their legs like a vice, making every step feel like wading through quicksand. The current is stronger than they expected, tugging at their ankles and threatening to pull them off balance. The roar of the river drowns out most sounds, but the low, predatory growl from the shore still reaches their ears, vibrating through the night. Mark's breath comes in short, desperate gasps as he pushes forward, his eyes locked on the opposite bank. It's their only chance. Get across, put the water between them, and whatever is stalking them. Claire stumbles, slipping on a slick rock. Her arms flail as she tries to steady herself, and for a terrifying moment, she almost goes under. Sam reaches out, grabbing her arm just in time and pulling her back up. "Come on, Claire. Keep moving," he shouts, his voice almost lost in the rush of the river. She nods, teeth chattering, as she clings to him, forcing herself to take step after step. They're halfway across when Mark glances back. The creature has moved closer to the water's edge, its eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. It paces along the shore, its massive form hunched and tense, muscles rippling beneath its thick, matted fur. The moonlight illuminates its face, a grotesque fusion of human and beast, with a long, wolf-like snout and eyes filled with a predatory intelligence. It snarls, the sound low and menacing, as it watches them struggle through the river. For a brief moment, Mark hopes the water will be enough to keep the creature at bay, but then it takes a step into the shallows, testing the depth with its claws. The sight sends a bolt of fear through him. "It's coming!" he shouts, his voice breaking with panic. "We have to move faster!" The water is up to their waists now, and the current grows stronger. Claire is shivering uncontrollably, her eyes wide with terror. Sam, pushing forward with all his strength, keeps glancing over his shoulder, his face pale. "Mark, help me with her," he calls, struggling to keep them both upright. Mark wades back, grabbing Claire's other arm. Together, he and Sam drag her through the freezing water, the opposite shore inching closer. The creature growls again, a sound so deep it seems to resonate through the river itself. It moves further into the water, its eyes locked on them. It's as if it knows they're cornered, and it's toying with them, savoring the hunt. Just as they near the far bank, the creature lunges. It splashes into the river, its powerful legs cutting through the current with ease. Mark's heart pounds in his chest as he pulls Claire forward, practically throwing her onto the muddy shore. Sam scrambles up after her, turning to help Mark as he struggles against the water. The beast is almost upon them, its growl turning into a snarl of pure rage. Mark heaves himself onto the shore, feeling the water drag at his legs one last time before he pulls free. Sam yanks him up, and they stumble back, falling into a tangle of ferns and roots. For a moment, everything is a blur of motion and noise, the rush of the river, the creature's snarls, and their own panicked breaths. Claire grabs the flashlight from her pack, swinging it wildly toward the water. The beam catches the creature mid-stride, its eyes glowing fiercely as it pauses, momentarily blinded by the light. "Get back!" Mark shouts, grabbing a branch from the ground and thrusting it between them and the beast. The creature hesitates, snarling as it paces at the river's edge, reluctant to cross further now that the water is deeper and faster. Its eyes never leave them, burning with an intelligence that feels almost human. They stand, backs pressed against the trees, hearts racing. The beast growls, a low, guttural sound that reverberates through the night, but it doesn't advance. Instead, it retreats slowly, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. The whispers in the wind return, faint and taunting. For a moment, the three hikers are frozen, staring at the spot where the creature vanished. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of wet earth and fear. Mark's hands shake as he grips the branch, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. "We need to keep going," Sam says, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't stay here." Claire nods, wiping a tear from her cheek, her breath still ragged. Mark takes one last look across the river before nodding. "We move. Now, we need to find higher ground and keep moving until dawn." The three of them push forward into the dense forest, the river now behind them, but the feeling of being watched never truly leaving their minds. The ridge feels like a fragile sanctuary, teetering on the edge of chaos. The mist thickens, curling around the hikers' legs like ghostly fingers, as the creatures circle closer. Mark holds his torch high, the flames flickering, casting long shadows that dance across the rocks. The light illuminates the glowing eyes that emerge one by one from the forest below, each pair more menacing than the last. The air is thick with anticipation. The howls have subsided into a low, unified growl, a sound that vibrates through the ground beneath their feet. Mark's heart races. Every instinct tells him to run, but there's nowhere left to go. The ridge is narrow, and beyond it, only sheer cliffs drop into darkness. "Stay close," he commands, though his voice wavers. "Whatever happens, don't split up." Sam nods, gripping a large rock like a weapon, while Claire's hands tremble as she holds her flashlight, its beam quivering over the approaching shapes. The creatures move with an unnatural fluidity, their bodies low to the ground, claws scraping against the rocks as they advance. Each one is massive, their forms a blur of fur and muscle, eyes glowing with a hunger that sends chills down Claire's spine. "Mark, what do we do?" Claire's voice is barely a whisper, her eyes darting between the advancing figures. "There's too many of them." Mark swallows hard, his throat dry. "We hold them off, use the light, keep the fire between us and them." But as he speaks, he knows their chances are slim. The torch's flame is weak, and the mist dampens the air, threatening to snuff it out entirely. The lead creature steps forward, revealing itself fully. It's larger than the others, its fur matted and slick with mud, muscles rippling under its skin. Its eyes, burning yellow, lock onto Mark. The creature bares its teeth, a snarl, half human, half beast. It pauses as if savoring the moment, before it lunges. Mark thrusts the torch forward, the flames flaring as he swings it at the beast. The creature recoils, snarling, but not retreating far. Behind it, the others grow bolder, advancing slowly, their eyes reflecting the flames. "Get back!" Mark shouts, swinging the torch again. Claire and Sam move closer, their backs almost touching his as they form a tight circle. The creatures circle them, their growls growing louder, echoing off the rocky cliffside. Mark's grip tightens on the torch, knowing it's their last line of defense. The night stretches on, each second an eternity, as the hunters and the hunted face off in the darkness.